Today I'm serving up your piping hot October 2021 monthly Bitcoin digest. Let's go ahead and jump right in. Welcome back to another video. My name is Ian Major. I'm an entrepreneur, Bitcoin pleb, and all-around raging capitalist. And yes, happy October to you all. Today's October 1st that I'm recording this, and so this will go out in a couple days. So who knows what will happen over the weekend. I woke up this morning to a fat green candle, which is always a nice way to wake up, especially to start the month, and indeed Q4. For those returning to the channel, welcome back, my friends. As always, it is nothing less than a pleasure to have you. And for those new to the channel, welcome to you as well. I know there are many of you, about 80% of you currently watching right this very second, are not subscribed. And so if you like this content, I invite you to subscribe and join us in our merry gang in cyberspace. I cover all manner of Bitcoin-related content, such as the monthly digest I'm doing today, which are really intended not to predict any kind of near-term price action. I could care less about that, frankly. Number goes up. There's only 21 million, right? 900 currently Bitcoin are being minted every day, and that will be cut in half in just a few short years, and then that will be cut in half in just a few short years, and so on and so on and so on. Meanwhile, the government's getting ready to, sign massive spending bills, at least in the U.S., and so there's only one way for this to go long term. But the reason I kind of go into some of the buckets you'll hear me go through today, such as fundamentals, recent price action, on-chain analysis, is to really try and tell the story behind the market for this incredible asset. Because if we understand something better, we have higher conviction around it. And if we have higher conviction around it, then you will be a cold-blooded hodler, just, dead inside when the fiat exchange rate fluctuates like crazy. That's the goal. But beyond these monthly digests, I cover all manner of, wallet tutorials, Lightning Network, DeFi on Bitcoin, and much, much more. So if that sounds interesting, I invite you to join us. But without further ado, let's jump into our first topic for today, which is really around some of the fundamentals, recent price action, and on-chain analysis. All right, so last night I was pulling some of these views together in preparation for filming this morning, and so I had the pleasure of needing to re-pull the price chart. Because we saw quite a green candle this morning to the tune of about 1,500 or so USD, and so that's really nice to see. Now let's just look at this price chart for a second. Again, the goal here is in no way to predict what's going to happen in the short term after this, but rather to kind of understand what has occurred. And so really the story, this is looking over the last month. We started September at about 47K. And indeed here on October 1st, we are back to that. And so after quite a run up in early in the month, dropped off significantly. That initial drop off, honestly, there's a lot of rumors going around. That was El Salvador made officially made Bitcoin legal tender on the 7th of September. And there was, of course, this huge sell-off that just so happened to coincide with that. It looked like an engineered sell-off that then cascaded into a bunch of liquidations of long positions. Who knows what the truth is, but anyway, you had this sort of big drop down to maybe 46 and some change. And then, as we progressed through the rest of the month, you then had China banning it once again. It's amazing. I'm going to show you some pretty funny views later. But for anyone who sold on the China news, I mean, you're not going to make it. I'm sorry. This is probably the 10th time they've done it. However, it is worth saying that, this time appears to be the most serious, but it is what it is. And so that's kind of later in the month, you can see this drop down, really driven by that, plus the sort of macro risk off factors of Evergrande. You've got the U.S. debt ceiling, that needs raising, and that's still in the balance. Plus, you have Fed officials in the U.S. continuing to suggest that they're going to taper. I say good luck with that. I could do a whole video on why, even if they do that, they'll actually be supplying liquidity in other ways to kind of do tapering or to do QE without doing QE. Anywho, that's where we've been. And what's rather wild about this is Plan B, who's very well known for his or her stock to flow model, right, which sort of predicts Bitcoin's price based on this stock to flow ratio, came out with this in June. Okay, this is June 20th. And this was back, Bitcoin's below 34K, triggered by Elon Musk's energy FUD, China's mining crackdown, so more China. And then he says there's, more fundamental reasons, there's weakness in on-chain data. And so he said, my worst case scenario, so this is his sort of worst case model, based on kind of recent price action and on-chain, suggested 47K for August. These are month close numbers, 43 for September, and so on. And so it is pretty wild that he is bang on. I mean, bang on to the cent for August and September. So I'm not saying that means that October, November, and December are going to be accurate, but it gives you something to think about. That is pretty extraordinary to see. It also raises the question of is this self-fulfilling prophecy? Is Plan B just so big and popular that traders and other market participants are sort of following this, and you sort of end up seeing it because so many people are seeing it. Who knows? But it is quite interesting. But let's get into some of the more kind of fundamental factors. For one, we clearly see whales accumulating at these levels, or at the levels we were yesterday, around the sort of 40 to 43 range. You can see this view from Glassnode. I think I grabbed this from Willy Woo. You can see that the transfer volume by size. So these are transactions of different band sizes. And so what's actually showing in this kind of teal color are transactions of $10 million or up, and you can see a big spike of that. And that's further kind of emphasized by this view from Will Clemente, which has a lot of squiggly lines, but all this is showing is a more zoomed in picture of price, and all the sort of bands that you can see, including the high concentration of them kind of just below, are bids, right? And so his point here is, well, for one, this could actually be a psyop in the sense that you could have market participants putting fake bids to make the market think that, oh, there's a lot of support at 38K, or there's a lot of support at 39K, whatever it is, right? And then they take away the support at the last minute. This is a thing, and it can happen. But against all odds, I mean, everyone was saying, oh, no way, Plan B's, we're not going to cling to 43K. The price the chart looks horrible. We're going to lose 40K. We're going to go into the 30s. Against all odds, Wales said nah, and Bitfinex Wales just came in and said nah, we're going to be 43K to close the month, and that is what happened. And so it is pretty interesting that these markets tend to be still highly influenced by whales, and this appears to have been a real kind of support level. So all of that, said another way, very simply, is that whales are accumulating at the low 40 levels. Whales do not accumulate unless it is smart to do so, or at least that is the case historically. So that is pretty interesting. And then all this time, the average hodler has been pretty resilient, honestly. You definitely have a lot of degenerate traders who just keep getting wrecked. Imagine getting wrecked and liquidated and then going long and getting wrecked and liquidated, and then going short and getting there's got to be just depressed traders all over the place in this market. But we don't really care because we're hodling, and indeed the average hodler has been quite resilient. And so we're back to what Willy Woo calls the never going to give you up phase. So this is basically looking at the kind of bubbly line is price, and the I believe the red are kind of is when it's selling, blue is when it's buying, and then the line at the bottom reflects holding sort of holdings of long-term hodlers. So these are folks. I think Willie, this is from Willy Woo. Willie kind of breaks the market into a couple key buckets. One is the Rick Astley, so never gonna give you up, right? That Rick Astley, and these are the long-term hodlers. These are folks who just really don't sell. Then you've got more kind of middle ground, and then you've got kind of the short-term speculators. And so you can see the last time we were in this kind of never gonna give you up phase, we had some pretty nice price action after that. I think an even clearer way to see this is the following from Checkmatey. And this shows the short-term supply. So that is the kind of red chart here that you see. And so let's just zoom forward to right at the end of this chart. And if we draw our line back to the left y-axis, we can see that this short-term supply, so the supply of Bitcoin that is being held by hodlers who are deemed to be short-term hodlers, given that they tend to trade and sell a lot, is at an all-time low of 20%. And so you can see that each of the last times it's reached such a level, there has again been pretty significant price action to the upside following that. And so another way to say this chart is if the short-term supply is at an all-time low, the long-term supply is at an all-time high. So hodlers just are not relinquishing their coins. Once you shook out some of the weakest lettuce hands there are, folks have been really resilient, and they're like, I'm not selling. So you love to see it, and this all sets us up for a pretty significant supply shock. I've seen call it supply shocktober. We shall see, but all of this is really, really sort of positive. And the other thing to consider, and I don't necessarily put all the stock into this chart any longer, but what this is showing is search interest over time for the search term Bitcoin on Google. And so you can see that huge spike, of course, in the 2017 cycle. And at no point have we been even close to that same level. And indeed, in September, it's like barely even, registering. Now, some of the comments in this have made good points of, that's because more people know about Bitcoin in 2021 than 2017. But I don't necessarily think that's an explanation for this either, at least a full explanation. So the summary of all those charts is that whales have been accumulating at the sort of low 40K levels. On-chain data continues to get ridiculously bullish. I know we've been saying this for months, right? But you're at all-time lows for short-term supply and therefore all-time highs for long-term supply. So hodlers are hodling, whales are accumulating, supply is coming off the exchanges. This is the perfect setup for a supply shock. And it's only at this point, it's only a matter of time. And from a kind of very fundamentals-based standpoint, we continue to see the recovery of hash rate. So, of course, hash rate plunged, as you can see on this graph, after kind of April and May, following the China mining bans. But we've seen a sharp pivot and recovery and a continued recovery, right? And so this is really nice to see. You see a lot of those ASICs and a lot of the mining infrastructure migrating to other jurisdictions that are going to take care of them and treat them better. The U.S. is certainly on that list. Places like Kazakhstan, probably even Russia to some extent. And so it's really interesting to see this rebound, which again has historically gone very in lockstep with price, because this is the security of the network, period. All right, so there's your little digest on sort of price. Again, I could care less what we see this week or even this month, or even the next couple months, but I do think we're going to see some fireworks, and it's going to be a tough time for bears, but let's see, but exciting stuff. Let's now move on to our next category, which is really around kind of adoption related news. All right, so one of the big stories out of the last few days, this was on September 23rd, is Jack Mallers and Strike announcing their Strike API, which Twitter has now integrated. This is super exciting. So basically, Twitter has a tipping function or tipping feature where you can go to someone's profile and, if they have it enabled, you can tip them for whatever, valuable posts or content, etc. And so they've now integrated the ability to do that with Bitcoin via the Lightning Network using the Strike API. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean you have to use the Strike wallet, but it makes it really easy. I believe you can use other Lightning wallets like Moon and others, but this is pretty cool to see. So take a moment to kind of think about what that means. You now have Twitter, one of the largest social media platforms on earth, that have integrated the Bitcoin Lightning Network. Remains to be seen what this sort of does, but I've covered in a lot of videos the kind of recent exponential growth of the Lightning Network, and I fully expect that to continue with this development. So it's really cool. I think it's an awesome move by both Jacks, Jack Dorsey and Jack Mallers. And you'll love to see it. You'll love to see these types of partnerships. Now, again, I always want to give the full picture. We should acknowledge that Strike is, of course, a custodial kind of solution. It has a lot of KYC, so a lot of personal information you have to put in order to use it. And so, ideally, you want to be using the Lightning Network and any of these pieces of Bitcoin in a non-custodial fashion. And so I think this will hopefully be an interim solution to get there. So we're not there yet, but it is really exciting to see. The other big piece is, of course, El Salvador. So on September 7th, as I mentioned earlier in the video, that was the official date where the Bitcoin legal tender law went into effect. Again, I say it on all these videos where I mention this. I'm fully against legal tender laws of any kind, even if they are for Bitcoin. I don't think a government should be telling its citizens what money they can and can't use. It should be up to the free market. But that said, it is what it is. Bitcoin really is solving for a massive problem, which is remittance fees and the sort of legacy financial system in which a lot of El Salvadorians are kind of excluded. And so this is a really exciting kind of update from Nayib, the president of El Salvador. It says 1/3 of El Salvador is using Bitcoin. So 2.1 million Salvadorans are actively using Chivo Wallet, not downloads, actively using it. Chivo Wallet is their sort of main endorsed wallet. Now, this last statement I think is the most important. Chivo is not a bank, but in less than 3 weeks, it now has more users than any bank in El Salvador, and is moving fast to have more users than all banks in El Salvador combined. That is what we're talking about. This open monetary protocol where you don't need permission to participate is massively transformational for many in the world, and especially those in kind of more developing economies and regions. And so all the kind of academia, Ivy League professors and Cato Institute garbage and, wokesters that say, Bitcoin is this and that and it's terrible, right? They haven't even kind of stopped to see what's happening. So you love to see it. Again, there are some less savory things about, Nayib, the president. People, are calling him a dictator and stuff. And I do think there are a lot of really actually good arguments about how he is in some ways, perhaps infringing on the democratic rights of the people. That's a totally kind of separate piece and story. But in terms of this, I do think it's really impactful in a positive way for the people there. So remains to be seen, but pretty cool stuff. And so this begs the question of who's next. There's little murmurings around different countries that are looking at this more seriously. Of course, when El Salvador made the original announcement, you had quite a few countries in kind of Central America, South America, that said they were also talking about it. We've now heard news that a few in Asia, even places like Tonga, are kind of thinking about their own ways of going about this, and so it remains to be seen. I think it's only a matter of time. There's also some rumors flying around that there will be a lot of Q4 announcements in terms of institutions or corporations having put Bitcoin on their balance sheet, which will get found out through their various earnings releases. These are rumors at this stage. Who knows if that's actually true, but again, could be a catalyst that we see as well. So with all that out of the way, let's now talk about a less savory, but unfortunately equally important topic, which is the sort of regulatory environment. All right, so China bans Bitcoin and broader crypto for the 10th time. Look at that, what a surprise. Now, to be fair, the rhetoric they're using, right, like they're outright banning all transactions. So, I mean, you can't transact. And on the ground, you've had domestic exchanges like Huobi that have actually started shutting off new user activation. And so this will, I suspect, be pretty chaotic as you see China sort of come offline, fully. But that sucks. Honestly, I don't know what else to say. This is not even news at this point. What's really funny is this following tweet from Crypto Cobain. And so look at this. Back when Bitcoin started their public banning, I think he means China, Bitcoin was worth 3 digits. I think it was about $500 when I tweeted this. And this was June 12th, 2014. It's probably about time China banned Bitcoin again soon. So again, this has happened so many times now. I think this time is indeed for real, and it will have consequences. But at the end of the day, long term, all China has done is sort of shut out its citizens from using this open monetary protocol, or at least attempted to shut them out. There's going to be ways that they get around it, of course. But honestly, I personally think this is a really strong signal that's, to send to the world. Right? Like if Bitcoin, if they didn't care enough about Bitcoin, they wouldn't have, why would they do this? And so I do think it sends a signal that hey, this is a real thing. The other big kind of regulatory piece a lot of folks are tracking is this kind of ETF timeline in the US. So these are all the various sort of dates and applications. Keep in mind, these are futures-based applications, but nonetheless, any ETF approval would be a massive catalyst for Bitcoin adoption. And so these are the kind of SEC deadlines. And, again, all rumors, but a lot of folks believe that there's some momentum here and that maybe this will actually be the time that one gets approved. Lastly, I just want to mention, all these kind of nonsense shenanigans that are going on with the infrastructure bill in the U.S. So this massive kind of spending bill that's being branded as a bill to improve the infrastructure in the United States. And while it has provisions to do that a little bit, it's also jam-packed with just all sorts of other outrageous kind of provisions. So I would encourage you to take a look at this. I mean, it is just, honestly, it's pretty depressing. One of the pieces being considered is this idea that the IRS would be able to force financial institutions to document any bank transactions over $600, which is very different from the current $10,000. And then you've also probably seen some of these articles or headlines around Biden expressing support for this idea of an annual tax on billionaires' unrealized capital gains, which is a totally ludicrous concept, right? If Now, I get it. I get that segment of the population is essentially borrowing money and living off that money against, scarce appreciating assets, and therefore they can like kind of get away with paying a much lower tax rate. But this is such a slippery slope, right? We know that if it starts with billionaires, it'll eventually trickle down to everyone else. And so super slippery slope. I put these up just to emphasize that privacy and privacy tools are going to be your best friend as we go forward. And that's why I'm going to definitely devote a lot of time and attention to those topics in future videos. With all that said, again, people always ask the question, well, once the US bans Bitcoin, right? I, for many reasons, think that's never going to happen. Too many people in the American population already own it. Including politicians. Like, you now have representatives of Congress coming out and saying Bitcoin, the U.S. should adopt Bitcoin as a strategic national reserve. In a Thursday afternoon session, Jerome Powell was explicitly asked, like, what are you going to ban this? Are you guys going to ban this? And he explicitly says no. Now, of course, that doesn't mean shit, but it is what it is. And in fact, I think the China news is a blessing in disguise, because the U.S. now knows that they can't ban it, right? If China banned it, the U.S. expressly cannot do it, because that makes them look like China, and that is the last thing that they want ever. They'll never do it. All right, with all that out of the way, let's conclude this video. All right, my friends, there you have it. I know I went through that a little bit quicker, the sort of pace, but we covered a lot of ground as always. We looked at the fundamentals, hash rate recovering, whales accumulating, hodlers being quite resilient, all sets us up for a supply shock in Q4. I expect we will see massive fireworks. And beyond that, we're seeing really cool adoption news in terms of the Lightning integration with Twitter, as well as the continued sort of march of adoption in El Salvador. And then we took a look at some of these regulatory pieces, China banning it for the nth time, and some of the game theory that kind of goes along with that. And keep an eye on some of these ETFs as we go forward, which I will be doing. And so if you're not subscribed, you know what to do. Hit that subscribe button. But I hope you found this edition's monthly digest valuable. If you did, you already know what to do. Give this video a like. Comment down below with your thoughts, questions. What do you think about some of these conclusions? Again, none of this is financial advice. Do your own research. But until next time, we'll go ahead and leave this here. As always, every sat counts. Until next time, I'll see you then.